Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Hindu analysis of the 18th June 2024 at the same Byjus exam prep IAS. Let us look at the articles that we are going to cover today. There are 6 articles for mains which we have to cover in length and breadth. The first one, NSAs of India, US review progress on iCET, silent on Pannun investigation. And the number 2 article, Gupta extradited to US, pleads not guilty in Pannun murder plot case. They both are related to each other. Not much to talk about here except one statement which is already written about there. But then we shall be talking much depth about iCET. Third, the last continent must remain a pristine wilderness. So we are going to talk about Antarctic, how the tourist activities have increased manifold in Antarctic, and that is threatening the Antarctic's ecosystem. Fourth, negotiating for peace. Again, a news item related to Ukraine, what has happened in Bergenstock. And here in the editorial, the writers are praising the Indian government's decision not to be a part of the communique at the end, which was brought after, the peace talks. Fifth, constitutional respect should not be reduced to optics. Now, we shall see Mr. Dushyant Dave, the very important, very senior lawyer, talking about what exactly is happening. Their respect for the constitution appears to be only for the optics. We shall not look into everything from the perspective of politics, but we shall restrict ourselves to polity, talk about Article 74, 77, all those important articles. Number 6, Netanyahu dissolves war cabinet after Gantz exit. Now, some changes happening in Israel which are going to have bigger repercussions in the future with regards to how the war with Hamas is going to go on. For prelims, there are 2 topics. 1 year after Titan's fatal dive, explorers vote to pursue ocean secrets. Second one, cancel green nod given to Great Nicobar project being talked by Congress. Congress is asking for this thing. So let us begin with the first topic, and you can see this is related to India-US relation. Very, very important relations for us. Now, as you can see here in the image, it is being shown the US National Security Advisor, Mr. Jake Sullivan, meeting Honorable Prime Minister, Mr. Narendra Modi. But basically, he is the National Security Advisor, so you can understand. He met our NSA, Mr. Ajit Doval. Mr. Sullivan is here in India on a 2-day tour, and he met him, of course, the Prime Minister, and Mr. S. Jaishankar, our Honorable Foreign Minister. Now, again, this whole visit is happening in the backdrop of this Gupta extradition taking place in US, where he has pleaded that he is not guilty. Yesterday, both the sides did not talk about that. Nobody said whether this Pannun incident was on agenda or not. But then, I'm really sorry, but it is expected to be high on the agenda. Now, please let us see what all was talked about here. Number 1, initiative on critical and emerging technology. iCET was talked. Now, what exactly is this? See, this was announced in 2022 when in the month of May, our Prime Minister, Mr. Narendra Modi, had met US President Joe Biden. They had met in Tokyo on the sidelines of the Quad Summit. And later, almost 6 months later, that is in January 2023, this was announced by the NSAs. What does iCET involve? As you can see, critical and emerging technology. So this involves your critical sectors like space, semiconductors, advanced telecommunications, artificial intelligence, quantum science, biotech, and clean energy. Later, some new things were added to this, and those were critical minerals and rare earth processing technologies, digital connectivity, digital public infrastructure. All this was added, and they were talked about. So that's your initiative on this one. Now I'll tell you, with regards to this, yesterday some talks were done. Fact sheet was presented, both the sides had presented. For example, on rare earth minerals, in the fact sheet they said that India's vital role with regards to mineral security partnership, including the investments, co-investments in lithium resources, the projects that are happening in South America, and rare earth deposits in Africa would be taken into consideration. Similarly, with regards to semiconductor, both the countries, they accepted that this is a priority area. Please understand, when it comes to rare earth minerals, when it comes to semiconductors, the close cooperation between India and US, it is mainly because they both want to reduce the dependence on China. And that's why they are doing so much of cooperation in new areas, in new, I would say, emerging areas. That's the thing that they are talking about. Now, if I go back, apart from that, there was talk about India-US Comprehensive Global Strategic Partnership. Now, let me tell you, in this, they are saying that, we are going to further strengthen this for the global good. And there were talks yesterday, and this is an ongoing talks, it's in very advanced stage, about India procuring 31 MQ-9B unmanned aerial vehicles, licensed manufacture of General Electric GE414 jet engines, as well as Stryker infantry vehicles. All this, India is talking to US about buying them. So clearly, with regards to defense also, our partnership is only growing. Now, when it comes to India-US ties, it looks that we are on a right track, though there are irritants, and one of the biggest irritant right now is the ongoing investigation regarding the assassination attempt on Mr. Pannun. Now, you can understand our second article is connected to that only. See, not much to speak about this right now. Only thing that you should remember is that one of the Indian nationals, his name is Nikhil Gupta, he is accused in a murder for hire plot. This attempt was to be made against whom? Mr. Pannun. Who is he? He is a Sikh extremist based in America and is an American citizen. And Mr. Nikhil Gupta, he was yesterday extradited. He had been arrested in Czech Republic last year on the request of US government, and now Czech Republic has extradited him to US. Even though Mr. Gupta had appealed against this, but then he has been extradited, and in the US court yesterday he made it very, very clear that he has nothing to do with this murder plot. So this is one of the very, very big irritant. And why it's the irritant? Because you all know, when it comes to the Khalistan issue, our relation with Canada is also on boil, and something similar happening over there is something that's not great. And that's why this is something we'll wait, we'll see what is happening over here. But presently, this is one of the irritants as far as our relations are concerned. Please add it to your Indo-US relations, these points. Specifically these first two, you should definitely add. Of course, this will again come in news whenever we, buy them. Right now you can ignore this also, but do remember this. And the projects that I talked about, semiconductor and lithium, that you should keep in your notes. Very, very important. That will give you good marks when it comes to Indo-US relations. Moving ahead. Okay, this I'll just make it better. Okay. Okay. Now, a simple article, but then there is something related to prelims. Number 1 point is related to prelims. 46th Antarctic Treaty Consultative Meeting was held in Kochi. Please remember this point. Where was this meeting done? It was done in Kochi. It was done last month. What was this meeting all about? This meeting was all about the Antarctic tourism. And the members here are talking about that we should have some sort of regulatory mechanism. Regulations. That is, how many people would go. Because, Antarctic has a very fragile ecosystem. You cannot allow so many people, thousands of people going over there. So there is a regulatory framework being demanded. But then no definite solution came out of this. Now, what is the issue here? Since early 1990s, Antarctic tourism has witnessed a dramatic surge in tourist numbers, which have exploded. Earlier there were few thousand in 90s, and now they have gone way beyond 1 lakh in 2022-23 season. So you can see it's like a boom that has happened when it comes to tourism over here. So this number is according to your International Association of Atlantic Tour Operators. They have given a number also. They say 1,18,089 tourists went to Atlantic in 2023-24. And more than 40% of this tourist number comes from United States of America and China. So you can clearly see that there has been a great growth, or I would say there has been a very rising global interest as far as the adventure travel is concerned, and a desire to explore this unique ecosystem, the Atlantic's ecosystem, of course, to, witness its wildlife and all. But then you all will also admit, if we people are going in such a fragile ecosystem, of course, there are educational benefits, there are economic benefits. These tour operators would get a lot of money and all that. But then, because it's a fragile ecosystem, you can understand, it disrupts, what all? It disrupts wildlife, damages the ecosystem, risks introducing invasive species which may cause harm to the wildlife over here. Global carbon footprint, gets added. How does? Because we travel to these areas, tourists travel. Pollution is increased. More ships are traveling to these areas. So because of all this, you can see here the Antarctic tourism, but it raises, environmental concerns. And that's why there is a demand that some sort of regulation should happen. Now, do we have any regulation or not? Yes, we have. You can see here I have mentioned the Antarctic Treaty that came into force in 1961 prioritizes peaceful use and scientific research. And there is another Madrid Protocol. It offers broad environmental guidelines, but it lacks specific tourism regulations. So guidelines are there. Please remember, there are guidelines, but regulations are what needed now. Because see, what happened in 60s, then the number would be in hundreds or thousands, the people who would be traveling to Antarctica. But after 90s, where we are seeing more than 1 lakh people are visiting these areas, clearly we cannot go according to guidelines now. We will have to go for regulations now. And that's why here comes the ATCM into picture, the Antarctic Treaty Consultative Mechanism. They are doing this, talks. Some progress has happened, there is no doubt about that. But then we need much broader guidelines, we need much better regulations. Because again, I'm telling you, the previous slide, the 2 treaties that we talked about, they are now proving inadequate. And that's why we need something new over here. What about us? See, at the ATCM 44, which happened in 2022, India had raised concern about this tourism that is going on. We had clearly said we need to monitor the tourist activities, and Resolution 5 that was brought in 2022 had advised against building tourism related infrastructure. What happens is people create these infra which would help the tourists. We have clearly made that we are not supportive of these things. So all this is in news. You should have a good idea about this Atlantic topic. Mr. KMCT, Director, Inter-University Center for Social Science Research and Extension, Mahatma Gandhi University, and Academic Advisor to International Center for Polar Studies. Again, Mahatma Gandhi University, Kerala is writing this. Okay. Last line that I want you to remember for prelims. If anyone asks you, does India have any Antarctic law? Yes. Please see here. Despite the lack of international census, India enacted its own Antarctic law in 2022. So that is something that you should remember. Please remember, last month the summit that happened was 46th. For prelims, you have to remember, this year also almost 13 questions came from IR section, and I want you people to keep an eye that, so many questions are coming from IR, and that's why we have to know about these obscure bodies also in great length and breadth now. Moving ahead. Okay. Now, this is an old topic. So many days we have studied, meeting happened in Bergenstock. Yesterday also we studied. Day before yesterday also we studied. India is not a party to the Communique. So this article is saying that this was a good decision on behalf of the Indian government. Everybody, whether you talk about Switzerland, whether you talk about Ukraine, whether you talk about other Western countries, they all wanted to win India's attention. Mr. Zelensky even at the last minute tried to, meet, and he met Mr. Prime Minister, Mr. Modi at the G7 outreach summit. But then we were very clear we will not be a party to any Communique. Reason? We are a very close partner of Russia, and it's a very key global South player, a country that has kept balance in the conflict. India's presence would have been a major win for the organizers. So we are a partner of Russia. We are a very, very important player as far as the southern world is concerned. And if we had been, signing that document, and I have already told you, China was missing, Brazil was as an observer status. You had UAE, Saudi Arabia, all those countries not signing. Had India signed it, it would have been a great boost for the Western world. And we just now studied, that US NSA has recently come to us. They also wanted that we should have signed this. But then this time, whom did we send? We sent a very high diplomat, the Secretary West in External Affairs Ministry. But before that, we had sent the NSA and Deputy NSA in the 2 preparatory conferences that had taken place in Jeddah and Davos. And as I said, it has been consistent when it comes to India. We have been thoroughly throughout, we have been abstaining from every resolution at the UN Security Council, IAEA, Human Rights Council, and other multilateral fora that seeks to criticize Russia. Please understand, Russia is a very key partner of ours. We have always got its support. And India is not saying that we are not willing for a talk between these two countries. We want that some sort of, compromise is achieved between Russia and Ukraine. But then we do not want to be seen on any one side. So we attending the conference should please the Western world. We not being a part of any, communique that was issued at the end should please the Russian side. And this way, the balance that we have been maintaining throughout this is very, very important and has continued. So it's again, many times we have already talked about this. Let's move to the next topic. And you can see Mr. Dushyant Dave, senior advocate, former president of the Supreme Court Bar Association, is writing this article. Now, at the very beginning, I'll tell you, there is some criticism of the present government as far as this article is concerned. And what exactly Mr. Dave is saying that, as you all know, I can write here, Prime Minister, Mr. Narendra Modi has become the Prime Minister for the third time. Mr. Dave says that Prime Minister had, paid his respects to the Constitution of India by touching it to his forehead, like this Prime Minister had touched the, Constitution, copy of the Constitution. So Mr. Dave says this was a great thing that the Prime Minister did at the Samvidhan Sabha. But then Mr. Dave is questioning, is this only symbolism, what Prime Minister is doing, or he really respects the Constitution, in its true spirit, letter and spirit. And as I said, this article is an article criticizing the Prime Minister or the actions, some of his actions. So Mr. Dave is saying that his actions so far as the Prime Minister since 2014, or for that matter as Chief Minister of Gujarat, show otherwise. Now, I told you we are taking out the politics from this topic and talking about polity. So first thing Mr. Dave says, look at Article 74 of the Constitution. What does Article 74 says? There shall be a Council of Ministers with the Prime Minister at the head to aid and advise the President, who shall in the exercise of his functions act in accordance with such advice. Now, just give me a second, I'll tell you. In this article, Mr. Dave talks about the great Baba Saheb Bhimrao Ambedkar also. That Baba Saheb had chosen for parliamentary democracy or parliamentary system over presidential system. Mr. Dave says, why was this done? You can see here, Mr. Dave says, looking at it from the point of view of responsibility, a non-parliamentary executive being independent of parliament tends to be less responsible to the legislature, while a parliamentary executive being more dependent upon a majority in parliament becomes more responsible. Very beautiful, I would say, comparison done here. So if in crux I say, Baba Saheb Bhimrao Ambedkar believed that parliamentary democracy here, from the point of, I should write, responsibility. If there is a non-parliamentary executive who is independent of parliament, compare him to an executive dependent on parliament, this one which is being headed in parliamentary democracy, would be much more, what do you call, responsible towards the legislature. Now here Mr. Dave says, as I said at the very beginning, this is a slightly critical article. He says that in the case of present government, it does not look so. Why doesn't it look so? He gives two examples. Number one, he says, June 9th, Prime Minister took the oath along with his Council of Ministers. Then on June 10th, there was a cabinet meeting. On June 10th, only after the first cabinet meeting, the portfolios were announced. Yet on the same day, June 10th, Prime Minister had announced Pradhan Mantri Kisan Samman Nidhi's 17th installment, which was around 20,000 crore to be paid. Now, please see here, the questions that Mr. Dave is raising here is, could the Prime Minister at all have done so? And was it within his purview under the rules of business? Such a scheme will be under the Ministry of Agriculture, with its working regulated by the Ministry of Finance, Department of Expenditure. So he is raising, why would Prime Minister take preemptive and perhaps unauthorized action? Now, second example, I said he's pointing out to two things. Second thing is saying the first cabinet met without the allocation of portfolio also took the decision to provide assistance through 3 crore additional rural and urban households for the construction of houses under Pradhan Mantri Awas Yojana. Again, Mr. Dave raises the question, could this all have been done by a cabinet sans portfolio? Which was the ministry that had initiated the proposal? Was the agenda circulated? Were the ministers aware of the details? And he raises, why this hurry? And the third thing he says, yet again without reconstituting the cabinet committee after the formation of new government, Prime Minister extended the tenure of Mr. Ajit Doval and P.K. Mishra as NSA and Principal Secretary to the Prime Minister respectively. So basically, and here he says appointments committee of the cabinet, old cabinet, that appointments committee was working. So based on these three things, Mr. Doval is raising that, see, again, in letter and spirit, the constitution is not being followed. Prime Minister is doing all this on his own. Now comes your constitutional morality, this portion that is being talked about. And see here, Dr. Babasaheb Bhimrao Ambedkar on November 4th, 1948, before the Constituent Assembly said, constitutional morality is not a natural sentiment. It has to be cultivated. We must realize that our people have yet to learn it. Democracy in India is only a top dressing on an Indian soil which is essentially undemocratic. So such a beautiful line that Babasaheb has talked here. Clearly it shows Dr. B.R. Ambedkar was knowing the problems. He knew that there might be a disregard for the constitution. And Mr. Dave is pointing out that nobody in the present government, whether that's a minister or whether it's a bureaucrat, is raising the questions on these. Now Mr. Dave says, if you talk about Article 74, thereupon provides that the President shall make rules for the more convenient transaction of the business of the Government of India and for the allocation amongst ministers of the said business. Now this is Article 77. If you look here, Mr. Dave is saying that Prime Minister, what he is doing has already been predicted by Dr. B.R. Ambedkar way earlier. For Mr. Ambedkar, morality was totally sacred, and that's why these things would have been followed. Mr. Dave finally says that of late what is being seen is that there is a complete disregard for the cabinet system. Complete negation also, you can say. Complete negation of the collective responsibility towards the president and towards the parliament. Mr. Dave is accusing that too much of power has gone in the hands of PMO. See here, I'll show you. Mr. Dave is saying here, pertinently, the government of India allocation of business rule as they stand today allocate only business to the PMO to provide secretarial assistance to the PM. On the contrary, they provide that the business of the government of India shall be transacted in the ministries, departments, secretariats, offices specified in the first schedule to these rules. So Mr. Dave is saying there has been a complete breakdown of the constitutional framework and ethos. Finally, he talks about the advent of the constitutional dictatorship. I remember, if I'm not incorrect, your 12th class NCRT for post-independence also initially starts with a quotation of Dr. B.R. Ambedkar where he is arguing against the cult worship. Similar thing is being talked about in the last paragraph by Mr. Dave, where he says, Dr. B.R. Ambedkar did warn that bhakti in life is good for the salvation of the soul. But in politics, it is the sure path to dictatorship. What are we witnessing is constitutional dictatorship, something that the framers were strongly against. And then he talks about Manipur, all that thing he is talking about. So I'm not getting into this, because again, it's the view of one person. I'm not saying that this has to be view of everyone, but then you can judge if it seems correct that, that the collective responsibility is not taken care of, PMO is getting more and more stronger. We can keep these points. If tomorrow there is any question where we have to do some criticism of the government, we can use these points. Moving ahead, Netanyahu has dissolved the war cabinet after Gantz exit. Now, please remember, as far as Israel was concerned, after October 7 Hamas attack on southern Israel, there was a war cabinet that was formed. And now, very, very influential leader, Mr. Gantz, full name is Benny Gantz. He was a centrist leader and also a former military chief. What he has done is, Mr. Gantz has resigned from the cabinet. Why did he resign? You can see here, left the government over disagreements with the way the war was being conducted. Going forward, now the Prime Minister, Mr. Netanyahu, is going to form smaller forums with ministers to take sensitive decisions about the war. Now let me make one thing very, very clear here. Mr. Gantz was a very, very key member of this government. With him leaving the government, Mr. Netanyahu would use the smaller forums. That includes his security cabinet. Here the far rightists would now be very, very influential. And this is going to be a problem for Mr. Netanyahu. Because when Gantz had joined this government, he had demanded that a small decision-making body should be there. And in the last few months, the small decision-making body was of Mr. Netanyahu, Mr. Gantz, and Yoav Gallant, who was a defense minister. You can see here, these three gentlemen. This was the small body which was taking all the decisions. But now Mr. Gantz, moving out of this, is going to have some repercussions. Directly, nothing is going to happen with regards to Netanyahu's government because it does not poses a direct challenge as far as or direct threat to Mr. Netanyahu's rule, but then it is bound to rock the Israeli politics for some time. Moving ahead for prelims topics, there are two topics and the first topic does not have much in that. You can see exactly 1 year. June 18 marks 1 year since the Titan vanished on its way to the historic wreckage site in North Atlantic Ocean. Now you all would know, remember, Titan, an experimental submersible which was en route to reach the wreckage of Titanic. It got destroyed exactly on June 18th. Concerns were there that this may not be successful. This was always there, but then on this day only we lost it. Now the thing is, by June 22nd, Coast Guard had announced that they had found the wreckage of this on the ocean floor. In the last 1 year, what this article is saying, even after this whole disaster, efforts have not gone down. In fact, people are saying that this is a new golden age of exploration. And this is all thanks to the technological advances that are going on. So just remember Titan, what exactly it was, what it was trying to achieve, and how did we lose it. Moving ahead. Congress is demanding to cancel the green nod given to Great Nicobar project. What is this project? It involves developing a transshipment port, an international airport, a township development, a 450 MVA gas and solar based power plant on the island. This project is spread over 130 square kilometer of pristine forest and has been accorded environmental clearance, one of the mandatory prerequisites by an expert committee. Now, why is Congress saying that this 72,000 crore project should be withdrawn by the NDA government? One of the points that they are raising is that the coastline where this port and the project is about to come is in earthquake prone zone, and it had seen a permanent subsidence of around 15 feet during tsunami. You can see in the last paragraph the objections are mentioned. So they are saying that, see, this is something that we should not go ahead. Now let me tell you one thing. You can see before that one more paragraph. These issues were the backbone of a legal challenge being adjudicated at the NGT, following which the court constituted an expert committee to investigate aspects of the clearance. The results are not yet public, so already people have gone against this in NGT. In NGT, they have formed a, expert committee to look into this matter, and the result of that expert committee is still not out. So all that is in news over here. So that was with regards to your Great Nicobar project. Let us look at the two mains question. Question number 1. Oh, it's repeated by mistake. Question number 1. Conserving Antarctica from anthropogenic activities is utmost important for its unique identity. Comment on it. This is a 150 words 10 marker. Question number 2 is discuss in detail India-USA strategic partnership in different areas of cooperation. This is a 250 words 15 marker. Try to attempt these questions, both of them, one from you can say environment perspective, though IR also can come over there. Second is totally a IR question. Try to attempt that, and let's meet again, same time, same place tomorrow. And till then, goodbye. Thank you.